In this video I will teach you how to play the Owens defense, and this is an amazing opening against e4, especially if you are looking for something that doesn't have a lot of theory. So the Owens defense starts off with the moves e4 from white, and then we are playing b6 with black. And the main thing if you want to learn how to play the Owens defense is to remember these the key IDs, in which we will always be fighting to try and win this e4 pawn early on in the opening. And I will show you many different variations, but most of these are very similar. So many people with the white pieces will play a d4, so they will get this e4, d4 center, and now we will play bishop b7. Sometimes they can choose to delay this, but most positions will transpose to this in the end. So bishop b7, and with this we are immediately threatening to win this e4 pawn. So from this move on, white will have to be on the defensive, and white has to defend this pawn. The most popular move to defend this is playing knight to c3. So knight to c3, and now we are going to play e6, and we are giving white time to play a move, but afterwards we are going to play our bishop to b4, pinning the knight because we still want to try and win this pawn in the center. So white, most people will play knight to f3. Then we play bishop b4, so we are pinning the knight and again trying to win this pawn in the center. And this is the first position where many players will go wrong. They will, for example, try and defend the knight, but you can take, and then this pawn in the center is already gone. We were already able to win this. Sometimes they will also play a3 to challenge your bishop. You can just take and then also win this pawn. So white doesn't have time to defend the knight. They will have to do something to defend this pawn. So most likely they will do this with the move bishop to d3, protecting this, and for now they will have to allow this pin on the knight. Then we play knight to f6. Simple ID, just again adding an extra attacker to this e4 pawn, so white has to do something to defend again. And there are many different variations from this point on. Most of them are very similar. We are going to take a look at the main line first, but I will also show you what to do in the other cases as well. So again, we are attacking this and white has to defend. So there are a couple of things white can do. The most principal move is to play queen e2 and defend this pawn like this. Black can also try to pin or knight. They can try to push. They can try to go back. So there are many different variations. But we're going to take a look at queen to e2 first. So queen e2, and again, just the main idea as always in the Owens defense, we are going to play pawn to d5. Attacking this pawn in the center. That is the entire goal for this opening. You just want to keep attacking this pawn in the center. White has to do something, and here they can push, or they can also castle, which is one of the most the best moves in this position, castling as well. But in many of those lines you will be able to damage this pawn structure, and here for example, if they take back, we even have this trick where we have a fork with this pawn move. So after we take here, white would have to push first. But many players choose to push e5 either way first. So you will often get this where your knight is under attack because of an e5 push. White can also push e5 earlier in some positions, but usually that's not so good. We will take a look at this later. So if they push, we are now able to jump into this e4 square, because this is protected both by the knight and then also from a distance by our bishop. And this knight is pinned. So there's not really any way for white to punish us for jumping in. Here again, multiple moves for white. The most popular one is probably to defend for this pin. Of course, capturing this is not so good as white because we can recapture, and then this knight is under attack. This cannot recapture and the queen cannot recapture, of course, because of our bishop. So white would have to move back with this knight and then also lose this pawn here in the center. So that's not so good. So taking here isn't really an option for white. White can also choose to castle, but you can already see in those lines we are winning a pawn and also attacking the rook. So that's probably also not something white wants to do. So I think the move you will see the most, well, some people take this, but of course if they capture they are immediately losing. The move you see the most probably is bishop to d2, trying to stop this pin. And against this, I would actually recommend taking here, and then if they take with the pawn, that's fine. If they take with the bishop, you can just capture their bishop and then go for this position. And damaging the white pawn structure is one of the key IDs in the Owens defense. So that's why we're going to take here. They can take back. You can always choose to capture here with the knight as well. The reason we don't do this earlier is because the queen would be able to take, and then the pawn structure is actually not damaged in this variation. So that is why we want to take here first, and then no matter which way white takes, let's say they take with the pawn, the structure is already damaged. And then we can take here on d2 later. You can take on d2 right away if you want to, but you can also play this move pawn to c5, because in many lines we will threaten to push this to c4, and that is a little bit hard on this bishop, since it will have to move or it will have to trade for the knight, which also isn't very good. Let's say they castle, again multiple options here from black. I would say capture the bishop and then you can push c4. There's also nothing wrong, of course, in this position with castling first if that's what you want to play, but I'm going to show you this variation. And I love this variation especially because you can see we are just winning time here against this bishop. The bishop is forced to go back into a more passive role, and we achieve this position. And I actually like to go for a queenside castling in this position as black. So we're going to play knight to d7. For example, knight to g5 from white, but here you will see in the Owens defense it's quite often really hard for white to find a good attacking plan, because their structure here is damaged. There's nothing happening in the center, the entire center is blocked. Well, the queen side, they don't really have an attack here, and the a4 attack never works, so it's hard for white to find a plan. The biggest plan they have is to play something like f4, f5 and try to go for a kingside attack. And that is why I like to castle on the queen side, because if you know white is going to come after your king here, why would you castle straight into their plan? So I allow them to play this knight here, you play h6, they go back here, and this might seem strange if you have never seen this, but the idea is just to free up this f4 pawn, and there's no way for us to punish this knight move to h3. So we are going to play queen to e7, freeing up to castle, pawn to f4, and again you don't want to allow this push to f5, so you can play g6 here, and this basically stops white's only plan. White may try to also attack on the queen side, but you can always stop this with a5, so white really doesn't have a single plan against you. Then they can also try to attack this weak pawn, but there is a really nice trick here, and that is also why it's important to play your knight to d7 and not to c6. Also, knight to c6 would be a little bit useless, because you will realize the knight basically has nowhere to go. That's why we play it to d7. Then we can castle, and this might seem totally strange, but there's not a single way for white to punish this and to enter this position, because this b6 pawn is guarded by our knight. And then in many lines you will just put your king here on c7 and also guard this. And there's just no way for white to come in. The only thing they could try maybe is putting a rook here, but even then you can just attack it with the bishop and they have to move. So really there are no actual plans here for white in this position. Here you could even move in with the queen and then also pick up this a4 pawn, so that's also not so good for white. White can also go for the entire kingside attack and just let this be, because they will realize there's no way to enter. But again, this is not really very good from black, because again we can play something like f6 and you will see this entire kingside is going to open up, and we will have our rooks and our queen present, putting pressure against the enemy king. And our king is totally safe here on c7. So really hard. Let's say black captures this. You can capture with the queen or with the knight, but I like to keep the knight here as a defender for now, so we can capture with the queen. And the entire attack here will fall apart. For example, if they try to play g5, you can capture this, but you don't even need to. You can just move up the queen. This is also a little bit annoying. This knight has to move, or they have to protect it with the queen. They can also do that. Then we can start activating the rooks, and this is just not good for white, and it's really hard for white to play in these kinds of positions. We also have this variation in which white will push e5. So this is the main line again, this main ID. We are pinning this knight, we are attacking this, we are attacking this, and we already took a look at queen e2, which is considered the main line, but white could also try to push, because pushing kind of solves their problem, since now, well, this pawn is gone, so they can no longer lose it, and your knight is also under attack. But in those lines you can also just jump into e4 here, and taking this as white isn't really so good. They are just helping us develop this bishop, And then, for example, they can castle, we can damage this pawn structure, and this is a fine position for us. And also they can't capture with the knight, of course, because this is still pinned. So most likely they will try to relieve themselves from this pin, and you can always just capture the bishop that keeps this pin alive. And then in many of those lines you will be able to do this trick where you can take on f3 with your bishop. And this is only possible in the lines where they do this early push, because now all of a sudden we can damage this side of the board and we can damage the pawn structure here. And it's again hard to play this as white. Here we can even come in with the queen, also threaten to pick up this. This is terrible, this is weak. This is not a good position to play for white. Most people even go wrong here. They just castle and then they lose this pawn in the center and everything is just falling apart for white in these kinds of positions. The best option for white here is to play something like a3, challenge your bishop. You can trade, of course they will take with the queen because they don't want to damage the pawn structure. Then maybe something like knight c6, trying to play for a free pawn here, but they can always block this with bishop to e4 because this both blocks the queen and also pressures this knight. But there is a really nice variation here that I want to show you, which is a nice trap you can set up, and that is to go for long castling. And if you go for long castling, I think, well, the players can of course also just castle long themselves, but I think so many players will grab this knight and then grab this free pawn because this looks just like a free pawn. But this is a trap that we have set up, because now we have queen takes here, and all of a sudden there's a lot of pressure against this white king, and it's hard to defend this from the white side. If white wants to defend, probably they will have to play queen c3, trade, and just look at this. This is completely terrible from white, and we can play rook here. Let's say they play f4, and then we can double the rooks. And yeah, black is just strategically completely winning in this position against white. And if white falls for the trap, they could also try to play this move queen a8, but this is losing because we play our king to d7, and now all of a sudden this queen is under attack and the queen has to move. If they try to counter with the rook here, you can actually take, and we are just up a full rook. So this doesn't work. Sometimes they can also try to capture here with the queen and then pin. Then you can just dodge with the king and you would get this exchange. And again, the structure is just really bad for white, and black is winning. We have an active rook, active king, so black should be able to win this. They can also go back here to e4 if they want to, which is possible, but then they are losing this pawn here on b2. And even if they try to go for this check, we can just drop the king back to e7. And white's position is just falling apart. So these are some really nice tricks you can use against the e5 line. Next thing we will look at is again the mainline position. So this is the main idea you have to always go for, this setup from white that we are trying to fight against. But what to do if they play bishop g5, trying to pin or knight? This also helps them because this pawn is no longer pinned. Well, you should immediately challenge the bishop with h6, and if they capture, you can do an in-between move here, capturing with the bishop, damaging the pawn structure before taking back. Because if you take back immediately, they can always try to play something like queen here and defend, so we can no longer damage the structure. If white goes back here to g4, I recommend just playing a g5, chasing their bishop back, and then here we are now winning this pawn in the center. We are winning this on e4, of course, because this variation, and then the knight cannot take. So here we are up a pawn already. So white basically is forced into this exchange if they don't want to lose a pawn. Then we do this in between move, damaging the structure, and you will most likely get something like this. And here I would just play d6, and this is a really solid position from black. We are just kind of waiting in a more defensive position, but the structure from white has already been damaged. We still have this active bishop, and some variation here, for example, is rook e1, knight here to d7. They could always try to push. You can just capture this and then just move the queen. Not really any problem here, and this weakness will remain here from white, and this is something we can always try and attack. For example, bishop here, because white is trying to play for tricks, and then you can go for something like long castles. And again, long castles, and we can push all of these pawns and start an attack. This is also supported by the queen and the bishop. So black is already winning here in these lines. The best option for white is probably to try and go for this queen exchange, and then you can play this beautiful move g5. And if they exchange queens, they are basically still helping us, because in many of these lines we will put a rook here on the g file, and then again together with this bishop we are putting some pressure on the white position. So that's also a nice way to play against this bishop g5 line. And then again we are going to take a look at the main line, because there is one more move, which is this move, knight back to d2. And I think you will almost never see this. This is actually the top engine recommendation in the Owens defense. But this is almost never played. On Lichess only 1% of games, and even in Grandmaster games only 8% of games. And this is the best move for white, trying to defend this pawn like this. Because there are no real immediate threats from black, I would recommend playing d5, because again we want to put more pressure here. But now white can actually push this, and in many of these push lines, well, this bishop will capture the knight or capture the pawn, but here that's not possible because we are blocked in by our own pawn. So we can go to e4, but then there is bishop, queen g4, and queen g4 again, a little bit annoying, and you have to know this move here, which is queen g5. And queen g5 is the perfect counter, because we are stopping the queen from coming in, and of course there's also no time for white to take here, because they would just lose the queen. So most likely you will get an exchange, and this knight looks so awkward because it doesn't have a single square it can go to. But the thing is, if white tries to capture you, there's not really a problem, because you can always go to e4, and let's say they capture, it doesn't really matter, they capture with the bishop for example, you can take here, and then this is protected, and if they take with one of these knights, they are falling for a trap, because the other knight is now pinned, and if they take with this knight, it's the same case. So that is why this move queen g5 is really interesting. And after this exchange, this doesn't really work, this also doesn't work because of e4. So if they realize that, they might castle, you can castle, and again they can still try to go for this, but then we are just going to do this in between move. We are going to take here first, because now of course if you do move to the center, you are just straight up losing a pawn. Well, I would say probably take with the knight first, then take with this knight, and you just lost a pawn in this variation. Here you would even lose your rook. So that is why you want to do this in between move, capturing here. They have to recapture, and then we can now go to the center, for example takes, and then this bishop has to move. So that is how you can play this. Again, f4, the same idea, we capture, we go back to the center, and we go for this variation. And here you could even play bishop a6, be annoying on this diagonal, and then in the future also play pawn to c5 here as well. Now it's time to look at some sidelines. So for example, this is a famous sideline where they defend the pawn with the bishop on d3 first. And I think this is one of the variations you will probably see the most when it comes down to the sidelines. This is the most played sideline. Just because it's really principal move from white defending this pawn. And you can just go for the same setup, and if white goes for something like a knight here, you can always activate your knight, and if they go with the knight, you can activate your bishop. And many times you will be able to just transpose into this, which is of course our main line position. But I will here take a look at what if white really tries to avoid the main line. So for example, knight to f3. Again, knight to f6, attacking the pawn, and here white can push, or they can also of course defend with the knight, but then we are going to get our main line, or they can defend with the queen, but that also in many lines transposes to the main line, for example here d5. So I'm going to take a look at push first. If they push, again you can always jump into the center here. Capturing is not really worth it for white, they are giving up their bishop and helping us develop. So let's say they castle, bishop e7, they attack us with the rook, and now we do have to do something with our knight. And in these specific lines, this move that's really interesting is this move pawn to f5. And this was not possible in the other lines, but here it is possible, and we are defending our knight with the pawn. So again, taking is really bad because we just get a really good bishop on this outpost in the center. And if they capture here, you can just take back with the knight, and now we have an open bishop again. And then also we have these developed pieces. We will be able to castle, for example develop here, or you could even strike in the center with c5. That's also something you can do. And of course if they capture you, well, you can capture with the bishop, but you can even capture with the pawn here. Both are possible. Let's say you capture with the bishop. So I think c5 is also a really interesting move here to play. If they capture, you can just go for this exchange, and here we can take, take, just look at this damage structure, and then now check, and then we are gonna take back the pawn like this. So this bishop d3 variation, I don't think it's something you have to worry about. Most of the time you will transpose into the main line, and if you don't transpose into the main line, you will probably get something like this, and it's hard to play this as white. Again, they can capture, you can capture here. There's not really any problem. Everything is solid, and we have these active bishops. We can develop the knight, so everything is fine for black. Another sideline, which I think is very rare, but I wanted to cover this, is what to do if they push pawn to d5. This is played 20% of games, so that's why you have to know this. As I said, knight c3 and d3 are like the main variations, but sometimes you might also get d5. But d5 is not such a good idea from white here, but it is something you will see about 1 in every 5 games. So that's why I wanted to cover this as well. Here we can play knight f6, and you will immediately see that white is a little bit overextended. These pawns are pushed a little bit too far, and it is hard to defend all of them. For example, knight to c3, e6, just our main IDs. And of course, this push doesn't work because we would just be able to capture here, and then we just won a free pawn. So in many lines, white will have to capture you here, and then you can capture with the f pawn, because this would be losing or castling rights, even though you can always play that. If white doesn't want to capture, they might attempt something like bishop here, but you can just unpin your knight, get something like this, and even if they don't trade, we are going to play h6. And again, this push doesn't work, we can just take it. This is not really that amazing from white. And if they then capture here later on, after exchanging the bishop, you can just do the trade. Again, damage the structure. This is all fine. Even if they go in with this check, you can just play this. And if they go with the queen here, you can even just castle. And you are safe. But it's important to know this, because if you get this exact variation here, you might think, ooh, I'm in a bit of trouble here. I'm in check, and then all of a sudden they attack the rook. But you can just castle, and white doesn't have any developed pieces except for the queen, so there's no immediate threat against your king. So this is fine. You can just chase away the queen. You are winning a move, for example, after queen here, and then you can even develop your queen. And black is really better in these kinds of positions. White could also just immediately take this pawn. You can take back with the f pawn, and then they can push, but again, we can go to d5. We can trade here, for example, knight f3, knight c6. If they come in here, we can always take. And this is also an interesting variation. The most played line by white is this bishop move here, which is actually a blunder. I think white here probably has to be safe and then just develop, and then we can also play bishop here or here. Both are possible. But many players will go wrong, and they will play bishop g5, and there is a trap here. And that is, you capture this, and now you eliminated the defender for this bishop. So of course, if white captures back, we straight up just won a piece. And if white tries to go for this queen exchange, well, you will see we still won a piece, because we took this defender first. And this is actually one of the most played variations in this system, where they push the early d5. So nothing to worry about really from the black side. It's also possible in our main line, this is our main line ID again, that white just immediately pushes e5, which is possible, but again, these early e5 or d5 pushes are not that good for white. We can just play d6, challenge the center, just take here, nothing going on, and then you can play knight here. Of course, knight f6 is not possible, so we're just gonna develop. White's gonna develop, we are gonna develop this knight, and then here white is gonna castle. And we were actually setting up a trick here with black, and this trick is we capture on f3, and then we capture this free pawn in the center. And this is something that is even hard to defend from white, and almost everybody goes wrong here, and they will castle, and they will allow us to capture this free pawn. I think the only real try is, for example, something like a3, because after this exchange, now this is defended. Of course, you don't have to take this here. You can also capture here first, damage the pawn structure, and then capture. And then again, the white structure is just completely damaged. So even this a3 move doesn't really work. And other than that, maybe queen e2, but that's already quite high level if they try to go for this. And then there is knight c5 attacking this bishop. And if white castles, we can just take here let's say they capture, and then we have bishop a6, and we are winning this pawn as well. So really hard. This early e5 push also doesn't work. And then the last thing I wanted to check is what to do if white just never plays d4. So white just doesn't play d4. A variation, for example, is if they just play knight f3 in the beginning. Then we are going to attack. And in many of these lines, you will actually get knight c3, e6, d4, bishop here, and that's all just mainline stuff. But white can also choose, of course, to not play d4 and, for example, develop the bishop. Knight f6, so as black, we always play the same idea. And here I'm going to show you what to do, for example, against d3. Of course, d4 doesn't work here. This immediately loses this pawn. And queen e2, we can actually take, and fork here as well. So there's not really anything that white can do here except d3, which is probably what you will see the most. And then you can just strike back in the center with d5. And now it's just annoying for white. Why is this pawn so passive? Why is this bishop here? It doesn't make any sense. The bishop has to move back. We can take up the center basically as black. White doesn't have a lot here. Bishop e7, castles, and position like this. I'm not going to say black is completely winning here, but again, there's nothing really to worry about. You can play a move like d4, push their knight back here, knight c6, and all of this is very natural from black. There's not really any problem. We have the center, we have more space, we have, I would say, more development or equal development. And even if they go for this entire exchange, nothing really matters. You can exchange rooks in the center as well. And white just doesn't have a single plan in these kinds of positions. So this is also fine, even if they don't play this d4. And black is even slightly better in many of these endgames. So that is the Owens defense. If you enjoyed this video, definitely subscribe, leave a like, and leave a comment, because I try to read all comments. That's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!